Hello and welcome to Find, Tell, Share, the Storytellers podcasts. I'm Chris Sissons and my business is Market Together. I'm a local marketing coach and I specialise in using stories for marketing and business development. And
I am Jemma Rosenthal. I'm a singer-songwriter, creativity coach, and I help people to find their voices. And on today's show, we have Madeleine Black. Madeleine has an unusual personal story which she uses to inspire and motivate others. She wants to end the shame, stigma, and silence surrounding sexual violence, enabling others to find their voice, whatever their story is. The sharing of her story publicly on the Forgiveness Project's website in September 2014 opened many doors for Madeleine in ways she never imagined, and the invitations started pouring in. Her memoir, Unbroken, was published on April the 4th, 2017, and she continues to work as a psychotherapist. Welcome, Madeleine, to the podcast. We're really
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Thank you both.
Thank you for being with us.
Okay, let's move on. As we always do, we start with the sorts of things that have been inspiring us. One of the things I do habitually, I've been doing it for nearly 2 years now, is to record incidents that happen to me during the day. I don't filter them. I don't think, this will make a good story, or I won't bother with that one because I can't imagine it would ever become a story. I just note them down as the days pass. So you can imagine how gripping that account has been over the last few months. But I set myself the challenge to find something from this last week that I've done that may in time become a story. So it's not yet a story. And what I've chosen is, and this will show you how exciting life gets under lockdown, my visit to the barbers. Now, and what I want to highlight is how that experience has completely changed in the last 12 months. I mean, I've used different barbers in Sheffield and other cities throughout my life, but the experience has been very, very similar wherever I went. But now it's completely changed. First thing that's changed is that you have to book in advance. No more just wandering in off the street, sitting down, reading the Daily Mirror, the only opportunity you ever get to read it, or even the Daily Mail, and waiting your turn, and then you go up. None of that. You've got to book in advance. You have to stand outside in the rain if somebody's still in there. Obviously, you need to be masked when you go in, and then instead of the old sheets, they're now disposable plastic sheets, and away you go. And then, of course, there's the manipulating of the mask, because when they want to cut the hair behind your ears, they have to sort of remove the mask, and of course, trying to sort of hook it round one ear and cut round and then put it back, that failed. This particular barber says she's getting used to it. She's only ever cut through the string on a mask once, which is pretty good. But also, and then of course, whoever heard of using a card to pay for having your hair cut? You're always paying cash. That's always been understood. But now, it's a lot more expensive than it was because you have to pay for all the disposable items and pay by card. So it's begun to change, and it will be very interesting to see how the experience develops in future. So have either of you two noticed changes, particularly in the last 12 months or 6 months or however long it's been?
Well, I've had my hair cut, yeah, it was a great experience. I love my hairdresser, so I think it was pretty much the same. I think we just had a deeper conversation, so it was really quite nice to kind of. She commented on how, like, because I asked her how she's been, and that kind of like helped her to feel a bit more comfortable, because she was quite shocked. She was like, oh, usually people don't ask me questions. I'm usually the one that's kind of talking to other people. So that was interesting. I don't know about you, Madeleine.
Any thoughts, Madeleine?
I haven't been into a salon at all. When we were still allowed to have people in our house in Glasgow, the hairdresser came to our house, which is what she's always done. But at the moment, I really don't like the idea of going to a hairdresser. I'm lucky my hair is natural color and it's just very long and plain and just doesn't really do much. So I think my hair might be down to my bum by the time lockdown will be over officially. So we'll see. It will keep me warm anyway.
I was interested, actually, Jemma, in you saying that you had deeper conversations, and that's been true. I mean, I don't particularly know this this barber, but it's the one that I used to go to if the other one was shut. But now it's become the default one because of the better conversations. But she also pointed out something else. She said now, and I mean, I know her name because it's on her website, and now she says she knows the names of all the customers, because when you book, you have to put in your name and contact details in case something's passed on at the barbers. So I suppose that's a change as well, because never in human history has any barber ever known the names of the customers. Anyway. Madeleine, you have something to share.
Yeah, so because I am a speaker, and obviously with COVID, like most people, my diary was wiped clean. So I have decided, it kept coming to me, I've been a guest on many podcast shows and been interviewed many times, but I thought I'm going to change seats. I'm going to sit in the interviewer's chair, and I have just about to launch my own podcast series, which will be called Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black. And I am going to be interviewing all the incredible people that I've met along my journey. I want stories that will heal, motivate, and inspire others, and people that are now making a difference. So I've done about 4 or 5 interviews, and wow, there's some amazing people out there. Yes. Incredible stories.
Fantastic.
So can you give us an example of the sort of people that you interviewed?
Yeah, the first person I interviewed is a friend of mine called Mike Haynes. And you may or may not remember that his brother David Haynes was kidnapped by ISIS in Syria when he was working as a humanitarian worker, and they murdered him. They beheaded him and put his video up on the internet. And David refuses to hate, because he said that's what they want. They want him to hate his fellow Muslim. So he really stands against hate. He goes into schools. He's spoken all over the world. He's now an OBE. He's been recognized for the work that he's doing. And he encourages people of different faith, different color, especially in schools, to make friends, to have a conversation, to see actually that we're more alike than we are different. And it is just extraordinary, his journey that he's been on.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. This sounds really inspiring.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so.
So really, you're doing something similar to us. You're getting people to tell their stories. And...
Yeah, it's really healing through storytelling, because like you, I really believe in the power of sharing stories, and I think that if a story's heard at the right time for somebody, it has the power to transform.
Yeah, I heard a quotation. I think it came from someone I don't know, but I've heard a lot about, called Brené Brown, and she said the untold story is not benign. And which is sort of turning what you were saying about the healing of stories on its head. I'm not sure if that's 100% true. I think, substantially, but I think there are circumstances where that might not be true. But I was just wondering how you respond to that.
Oh, I love Brené Brown. I just think she's amazing. And she really encourages people to own their stories and their vulnerability, and to be an authentic human being. And I have read most of her work and watched most of her videos. I think her TEDx has had something like 45 million views or something, the power of vulnerability. She's an incredible force for good.
Yes,
she's amazing.
I'll need to catch up with her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I've read a lot of her books, and I've been a fan of Brené's for ages. I think she's fantastic. She's got a book called Dare to Lead as well, and her newest one is talking about like that we're all leaders basically, and how we treat each other, but also like how vulnerable we are. So I'll talk about what I've found this week as well, my inspiration. So I've been working on this vulnerability actually with Chris, because I've actually found it a little bit difficult to tell my story for quite a while. I did tell it on Chris's show, has a Telling Stories Making Business, and I told my story, and now we're just going into a bit of deeper depth of how I can use different stories from my life in my business, which is obviously includes finding your voice. So it's been an interesting journey for me, because I'm just sort of recognizing all the places where, okay, this still feels a little bit vulnerable for me. Can I share it this way? How is it best to be told, to be understood, and to really heal? Like Madeleine was saying, how can it really serve my customers or somebody that wants to work with me? And how can it be shared in a way that makes sense to them, and that they go, okay, I relate to this. I hear what she's saying, and then they can, call to action kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
So, right, shall we move on to Madeleine's story then?
So my story, as I was saying, it starts really in the late 1970s when I was just 13 years old. And I guess I did something that most people do to their parents at some point in their life. I lied. I lied about where I was staying. My girlfriend at school just was one of these really cool girls. She had the best clothes and she wore makeup and she didn't have the standard shoes. She just was really trendy, the most popular girl in the class. And she asked me to come on a night out. We knew that her mum was away and we had the use of her empty flat. And somehow we managed to buy a bottle of vodka, which we took to a local cafe in North London, and we drank it in secret. I mixed it with orange juice, and didn't take very long for me to get very sick because I had never ever drunk before. And subsequently, after throwing up everywhere, we were kicked out of this place. And two of the young men from our table at the time took us back to her mum's empty flat. And, I've often wondered about the taxi driver as well from that night. He must have seen what was already starting to take place in the back of his taxi, but he chose to ignore it. His only concern was that I wouldn't be sick and to get me there as quickly as possible. By the time we did arrive at the flat, I was literally legless, and the two of them bumped me and dragged me up 4 flights of stairs. And when we arrived into the apartment, they put us into separate bedrooms. And it became very clear, that they weren't there to take me out of the clothes that I'd been sick in, that they weren't there to let me sleep off the alcohol. They were there really for something else. And the two of them then proceeded to rape me over 4 to 5 hours. It was a very strange experience. I was very close to being killed on many occasions by them, but clearly they didn't succeed. But a lot of the time I left my body. I was very aware of what was going on. To try to avoid what was going on, I started to count. I noticed that there was a wallpaper border around the top of the walls, and I just counted these bows, which it was made out of. There were pink and grey bows, and I just counted the bows over and over and over again. And there were 44 bows in total, which is a number that follows me everywhere still to this day. After a while, though, the counting didn't help. And then I literally left my body, which so many people have said to me afterwards, that have spoken to me, that have heard me speak or read my book, that they completely understand what that meant. And looking back now, as a psychotherapist, I can see that when we are in extreme cases of trauma, we have to get out of the way. I think if I'd stayed in my body, I might not have been here today. Which is why I think it felt very dreamlike for many, many years. It was very hard to grasp because I did leave my body and I never felt connected in for years. Very near to the end, one of them threatened me with his knife, which he had already used on me. He'd already stabbed me. And he told me that if I spoke about it, then they would find me and they would kill me. And I had looked into his eyes and I believed him. I believed he was capable. And then they left. And in the morning, I thought they were coming back. I could hear this sound, but it wasn't them at all. It was the bracelets on my friend's wrist. It wasn't the keys in the door. She was now in the bed next to me and she hadn't been touched at all, but I had tons of injuries on my body. I had no idea how I'd got them. We both decided to clean up the flat and not speak about it. So I scrubbed my body in the hottest bath that I could run. And once we got dressed, we just both went our separate ways. And this was a Sunday, so I went back to my parents' house and she went back to her grandma's, which was where she was meant to be staying. And the following day, Monday, I went back to school as if nothing had happened. But now I know, what we don't speak about, it has to come out some way. It leaks out of us. And I developed eating disorder. I had depression. I used drugs and alcohol to numb out. I just didn't understand the point of being me. And I just thought people would be better off without me. So one day I swallowed handfuls of pills, which ended up in hospital. I didn't even know that I'd had my stomach pumped. And from there, I would spend about another 3 months in a children's psychiatric ward, which I was moved on to after I had been into a general hospital when I had attempted suicide. And, when I was writing my book, I decided to ask for my notes. I wanted to see if they had any idea why a normal 13-year-old girl turned into one overnight, who literally couldn't speak, who couldn't eat and hated herself. But nowhere in my notes did it suggest I'd had a massive trauma. They just had me down as an adolescent with eating disorder, just a depressed adolescent. But after a little while, I put on enough weight, so they allowed me to go home. But my behavior just went wild. I just, because nobody had known what had happened at this point, and I just rebelled even more, partying really hard, becoming promiscuous, because if somebody tried it on, I was just too scared to say no. I was very worried it would get violent again, so it was easier. And one particular morning, as I'm sneaking in late, my mum told me not to go out, and I went out. She is so angry, and she is screaming at me, telling me, "Don't you realize the danger you're putting yourself in? Anything could happen." Inside my head, I'm thinking, well, the worst has already happened, but I couldn't find my voice yet. So I decided to leave a note, which I wrote, and I left on my pillow before I went to school the following morning. And when I came home, both of my parents were waiting for me, and they asked me, "Is this true?" And I said, "Yes." So they called the other girl that was involved, and she said, "No, it hadn't happened like I said it had. They were nice boys. They just brought us home. They wouldn't do that." My dad was still insistent on going to the police, but my mum was really quiet, and it took me years to understand her silence. She revealed to me many years after my dad had died that as an 8-year-old girl, she had been raped by a neighbor. Every time my grandma would send her to play with her friend, this man would abuse my mum. She was able to tell her brother, who then told my grandparents, and this man was found to be abusing his daughters as well. So he was charged and sent to prison. But while he was inside, my mum's family moved house and they never spoke about it again. So in that moment when I'm confronting her with my story, it was her trauma that silenced her. She couldn't say anything. But I felt like my friend has betrayed me and my mum doesn't believe me. It was a really dark time in my life, which got worse. My mum discovered that I was smoking a lot of dope with me and my friends, and she called all of my friends' parents and told them exactly what we were up to. I wasn't very popular at school. Nobody was speaking to me, as you can imagine. They all got into so much trouble. And they suggested, my parents, maybe it would be a good idea to get away from the scene or the bad influences that I'm involved with and spend a year away or so. And I just thought, well, what have I got to lose? I was going to school in my school uniform, but just heading to the park. I wasn't going to school. And I said, yes. So I did. I went to Israel for a year, and I spent 6 months on a kibbutz and 6 months in Ashkelon, which is where I met this blonde, blue-eyed Glaswegian called Stephen, who has been my husband now for 32 years, and he doesn't really have any hair left to talk about. But, he was the first man really that I felt safe with, and I knew that I could trust him instinctively. But when I came back, he was in Glasgow, I was in London. I would drive him mad. I couldn't understand why he wanted to be with someone like me, because my opinion of myself was still so low. My self-belief, my self-worth, my self-confidence. And I really would drive him mad. I would ask him over and over again, why do you want to be with someone like me? You could be with anyone. How can you love me? But he just always replied from a very connected place that he just did. And over time, I saw with his love that I was lovable, that I could allow love in and I could let love out, but I could slowly learn to like myself and maybe even love myself one day. Then after about 5 years, he popped the question and I said yes, obviously. But before I said yes, I had to remind him that I would never become a mum. I had told him years ago, and I didn't know if he'd remember, because I just thought that giving birth was going to be like being raped again. And I thought, I can't put my body through that. I was so scared to be around men or to be in that vulnerable situation and the pain of it, everything. It had left this incredible fear with me. And he was fine. He said, no problem. We would just be you and me. And it was for a few years. And I can remember the exact moment when I completely reversed my decision on motherhood. We would take all of our annual leave every year. I don't know why I live in Scotland, because I do like the sunshine. And this particular time we were in Thailand, and he turned to me and just kind of wondered out loud, maybe we should start a family. And I was all ready to respond with my usual response of, I can't do that. Why? But something inside of me thought, if I never become a mum, then they've won. I am handing all my power and control to these two young men, and they have no idea. So it was there and then that I came up with a plan that I call my best revenge. That not only was I going to become a mum, but I was determined to live my life as best as I could, just refusing to be identified by what had happened to me. And so when I came back, we researched counselors, and I went back into therapy. And 2 years later, the first of my gorgeous girls arrived, Anna. And then 3 years after Anna, along came Mimi. And then I had Layla 5 years after that. And I thought, that was it. I thought by doing the thing that I was terrified of, becoming a mum, that I had healed myself. But looking back now, I can see that we can convince ourselves of anything, that even though I was outwardly, I guess, a bit like a swan, everything was in control, I was still paddling away like crazy underneath. And it was actually through having children and training as a psychotherapist that I saw I had so many fears and phobias still, even though I had become a mum. When Anna was 11 and she was going up to high school, as they call secondary school in Scotland, she said she was going to take the public bus with her friends. And I said, I don't think so. I'm going to drive you to school like I've driven you every morning to primary school. But then she said, oh, Mom, everybody's taken the bus and blah, blah, blah. So I caved in. So I said, okay, that's fine. You can take the bus. Here is your bus money, and here's a rape alarm for your other pocket. Don't listen to your music with your earbuds in. Sit nearest to the driver. And then I watched her that morning jump onto the bus stop. We lived very near to the bus stop. But then what she didn't know was that I then jumped into my car and I followed her all the way behind that bus to school. And I just thought, what are you doing? This is crazy. What has been the point of bringing these three girls into the world if I then infect them with all of my fears and my paranoid thoughts that the same thing will happen to them? I want them to be spontaneous, confident, strong women, and this won't help them at all. So I had to learn to let go, which is very hard, especially for a Jewish mama. I had to really let them be who they're meant to be. If I want them to be independent, I can't wrap them in cotton wool. So at the age of 15, with her fake ID, she was out clubbing and doing all the things that normal teenagers do. Now she's a very sensible 27-year-old homeowner, and I have a grand dog, and she's about to get married. So yeah, she's really in a good place. They all are. And when I was working as a psychotherapist, my college used to say to me that the clients you get are a gift. And one of the clients I got was this young man. And after about 6 weeks or so, he told me that as a 13-year-old boy, he had been raped as well. He was on holiday with his family, and his mum told him not to go on this certain path outside of the caravan park. And he ventured up that path, and he met a tramp who raped him. And, when he was talking to me, the way that he responded, he told me he felt dirty and contaminated. It just resonated with me as his therapist so much. When he said that he scrubbed his body most days with cleaning products, he didn't know that I used bleach in my bath to get the scent off my body all those years later. When he told me that he changed his underwear a few times a day, he didn't know that I carried spare pants in my bag because I thought that I was still dirty and I could smell them. And, he really made me think at first, gosh, you feel and think just like a woman. But then I got it. I saw that he thinks and feels just like a human being. And that really just dissolved my fears about working with men, at least in the therapy session. It really just changed a lot for me. But then I saw, I still had fears and phobias, and I don't want this to be a shadow over my life. I want it to be able to live my life as freely and as spontaneously and as present as possible. So I didn't know it then, but I guess I was really doing kind of exposure therapy. So I put myself into situations that really would terrify me normally. And there were simple things, from even putting my wheelie bin down at the end of my garden in the pitch black if Stephen was away, to not driving with the buttons down in my car, to walking, not crossing the road when the man was there. So many things scared me. I realized that fear was my best friend. And I think of the word fear as false evidence appearing real, or face everything and rise. And I just thought, I've done the first one for years and years, and it's time to do the second one. It's time to really face my fears head on. So yeah, I've put myself into some situations that I would never have believed I could do. And again, I thought, this is it. I'm really good. I'm okay. I've had my kids. I've faced tons of fears and really worked them. But then Anna turned 13. And I was studying psychotherapy, doing tons and tons of personal development courses. And I just started to get all these flashbacks, all these nightmares and memories that just came haunting me. And I thought, if it was that bad, I would remember it. I really would. It can't have been that bad. I had worked at Women's Aid for 14 years and Rape Crisis for 6 years. And I just thought, I'd heard all these people's stories, and my mind must have just mixed up. And I even know what we can do, how we can dissociate. I know from a very professional point of view, but when it comes down to you, that didn't come into my thought process at all. So I went back to therapy. I was the worst client because I asked my therapist to take the pictures away. I didn't want to see them anymore. Now, obviously, I realize that the pictures come back when we're ready to face them, the memories, the nightmares, the triggers. Whether my mind believed it or not, I was actually time for me to finally face all that was done. And it's interesting because after a while, it wasn't the pictures that were causing me the distress. It was my denial, my refusing to believe that this had happened to me. But after about 3 years of therapy, I saw that, I'm not what they did to me. I'm not my body. I'm not the things that were done to me. All of us are so much more than the events in our life. And very near to the end of these sessions, he suggested something outrageous to me. He just made a comment, and he said, maybe these 2 young men weren't born rapists. And at first I was just so angry with him. I thought, how dare he say that to me, because I was filled with hate and revenge and anger. And I plotted all these fantasies in my head of somebody taking the 2 of them, kidnapping them, tying them up and beating them up, but, raping and torturing them for the same length of time. So they would get it. So they would know the impact isn't one night. It lasts decades. But he kind of planted a seed in my head, which I guess started to grow, and it sent me on this journey of inquiry. And I wanted to understand how two young men knew to be so violent towards another human being, because I do believe we are all born a blank sheet. My manager, where I worked at the counselling centre for many years, she used to be a midwife, Anne, and she told me something which I never forgot. And she said that she had delivered thousands of babies and she never once met an evil one. And just like her, I do believe that as well. And that really, somehow, I just started to feel compassion in my heart towards them, which took me by surprise, because I thought, I've done a really good job of living my life as best as I could. And I think I've done a pretty good job. But they have to live with what they've done to another human being. And I did start to wonder, what have they seen, heard, or even experienced themselves? And then I realized I could take this a step further. I could choose to forgive them in order to completely make peace with my past. And, I'm not a forgiveness preacher. I don't tell everybody that the only way to heal is to forgive. It's a very personal choice. But this was the way that I could cut all my ties with them. It cut the chains that linked me to them, that linked me to my past, and it stopped my personal growth. When I was caught in anger, I was just held back. So forgiveness really was, I guess, my key to freedom, and it totally set me free. It was an act of self-love and self-empowering. About 6 years ago, as you said in the start, I did share my story with the Forgiveness Project. I came across this organization and they heard about my story and asked if I could share it. And they said, you don't need to have your photo. You don't need to put your name. You could be anonymous. And I just thought, I'm tired of being ashamed. I'm tired of being ashamed for a crime that was committed against my body. I realized that I had held on to inappropriate shame for years. The shame never belonged to me. The shame always belonged to them. It was never my shame. And I said, no, you can put my photo and my name. I'm not saying that I wasn't terrified on the day that I did share my story, but since I shared it, it's just changed everything. It's like standing in that shame has shattered that shame as well. And as we said, it's opened up all these doors for me. And just before I was about to publish my book, actually, Unbroken, my publishers beforehand, they had told me not to do too many interviews because I was doing a lot of media work, TV and radio. But I was contacted by Radio 4 and I was going to be interviewed for the one-to-one show. It was going to be about redemption, and my interviewer was going to be Sir Trevor MacDonald. And I thought, I can't say no to Sir Trevor. I mean, what an amazing opportunity. It might never come around in my life. So I said yes to that interview. It was just a few months before the book was out. And it was then that I really learned the power that comes, when we share our stories, that we're not storytellers, but we are story healers. The interview was great. It went really well. He obviously is a fantastic man to meet. It was delightful. But afterwards is what happened that was more amazing. My friend's mum had been listening to the show, and when she popped around to see her that night, she said she was just alive and animated in a way that she had never seen her mum before. And to cut a very long story short, she told her that she had been raped as a teenager, just like I had, the woman she heard on the radio. My friend's mum was 84, and she ended 61 years of her silence when she told her that story. And she said that she has changed so much that she is lighter. She now tells her other things. She feels like there's this new bridge that has been built between the two of them. And she also thinks, if she hadn't heard my story, there's every chance she would have taken it to the grave with her. And that really makes me think of all the other men and women out there that have put themselves into their own prison of silence, that can't find their voice. And that is my motivation. That's really why I speak out. And every time I speak out, I really think of her. If I can just make a difference to one person and give them the power to find their voice, then that is my job done. Because really it was somebody else speaking out that helped me to find my voice. And I think that courage is contagious. And she really is the reason that I'm going to continue speaking out. It's taken me a long time to find my voice, but I won't be quiet anymore.
Thank you so much. I've got tears in my eyes. I'm just, I just think how you can also the parts about like how the other people responded to it, like this old lady and the young boy or the man that you had in your therapy, and just the impact that it can have just from one person telling their story and then somebody else to hear it and go, that is like my story, or even just to resonate in a tiny way in some shape or form. It can change lives. So I'm just so grateful that you're on the show, and just thank you.
You're welcome. And sadly, my story is not uncommon. It is the story of many people. But like I say, I think courage is courageous, and it's the ripple effect.
Yeah. What would you say to people that perhaps have a story but haven't processed it enough to be able to share? What's the process that you went through to get to that point where you felt able to tell your story?
Find your voice. Don't put any time or pressure on yourself. And I've done a load of therapy. I've tried every single therapy go, and I've done a lot of personal development. And I wouldn't speak if I wasn't able to, because I wouldn't use the stage for therapy. And, telling your story means different things. If it's telling your story for the first time, you don't want to be on a show or on a stage. You want to find someone that you trust to tell your story with. Be very careful who you tell your story to, make sure you really trust them. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It could just be someone that's there for you. Because I think to be listened to be heard, and to be believed, there's nothing more empowering than that. And for the listener, it's just to listen. It's just to support them and to give them the space that they need. And it's a process, I thought I could never, ever share what I had to share because people would be disgusted. They wouldn't want to know me. They would look at me differently. But I realize now that 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists. It wasn't down to my clothing or my drinking or anything. That had nothing to do with it. So, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, aren't I? But yeah, finding your voice, you find it when you find it. If it's your intention, then you build on that intention to find your voice.
Thank you. Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Yes. I think I was saying I had a few reservations about Brené Brown's quote that I shared earlier, and I think it. If I could quote someone else who I've also mentioned in this podcast, Matthew Dix, one of the things he says is tell the stories from your scars and not your wounds. And I think that's why I have that reservation, because I think if you are premature in going public, and feel pressure, I've got to promote my business and this is the story, I need to do it, that's not going to work. From my point of view, I use stories for marketing as opposed to for sort of in a therapeutic sort of way or healing. That's not my main aim, although I think I lost my thread now. It'll come back.
You said to speak from our not from our scars, but from our no the other way around. Not from our
scars.
Yes.
From our scars.
Yeah. And I couldn't do it if I wasn't okay. I really couldn't speak out if I wasn't all right.
Oh, yeah. And when you're trying to create an image in public, you need to be focusing on the emotion of the audience. I'm sure that's true for healing as well. Yeah, so we're talking about speaking from scars as opposed to wounds. The thing that when you're actually performing a story, the thing about emotion is if you're overwhelmed by emotion, the emotion the audience is likely to feel is embarrassment.
And I wouldn't like to traumatize my audience either. That's not my job.
Absolutely.
I want them to see that, I've been through this traumatic time and it was painful and it was horrible, but I want them to see that I've come out. I want to offer hope, because somebody once said to me that hope stands for hold on, pain ends. And I do believe there's always hope. We can really get through anything that happens to us if we choose to. We're all so much stronger than we think we are. So I would never use the stage for therapy. I can only speak out because I'm really so okay with it all now. It doesn't impact my life at all.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that interested me, as I'd not heard that particular aspect of your story, was the section about forgiveness. And it is powerful. And you hear occasionally on the news, you hear from maybe a parent of a child who was killed or something like that, years later, who still haven't processed, and the realization that forgiveness is for the person who forgives.
Absolutely, it was nothing to do with them. I didn't need them. I didn't need a meeting with them. I didn't need them to stand in front of me to tell me they were so sorry. It was entirely for me to allow me to understand, to accept, and to let go of it all.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
I think it's fantastic they're able to do that.
Thank you.
And yeah. Okay. So we're moving to the share section of the podcast, and so I just want to talk a little bit about how I came up with a song. So it's very, very new, but it was based on, well, it's not to do with Madeleine's story, but when I watched your TED Talk and another interview as well, where it was going more into the forgiveness, and you talked about how giving people a safe space to feel their feelings is really important. So this was kind of inspired by that, and it is very new, so just bear with me. It's sort of a poem / a song. Yeah. And it's interesting you talked about the word fear as well. Well, in the song, the fear we're talking about the one we don't want. But I like the face everything and rise. No shame, you can feel your pain. No fear, I will listen. It may not be quite how it seems, and it's safe to share your dreams. I know you're afraid, but I will listen. She sits in a room, and she holds in her hand a box that she's held for years. The box is full of secrets that she doesn't want to share. The fear overwhelms her. She knows she has something important inside, but she wants to cover up so no one can find it. No shame, you can feel your pain. No fear, I will listen. She starts to open the box, and lots of notes fall out, things she's forgotten about, and tears fall down her eyes as she remembers. She's a prize. She's got a prize inside of her mind. She walks across the room, where she's held the box so tight, and opens a window and allows the winds to rush in as it picks up the speed, and her notes fly out and her mind's set free. She breathes, a sigh of relief. She's finally free. No shame, you can feel your pain. No fear, I will listen. It may not be quite how it seems. It's okay to share your dreams. I know you're afraid, but I will listen.
I'm the one now with tears in my eyes. That was beautiful.
So I hope that. Oh,
it was
I hope you could
beautiful.
hear
Yeah,
it.
really
Okay.
moving.
Could you hear it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's we need to work out how to get you better known and get your music out there.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Well, I think, just so you know, that song wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Madeleine, because I really was. I went through a process when I was listening to your story. Obviously, I listened to it before the podcast, because it would have been interesting if I heard it for the first time on the podcast. But I had to go through like a sort of healing of my own, and then the way that I process things is through songwriting.
Yes.
Well, it's one of the ways I process things, and I just kind of got this image of like, this person that has held this box of her feelings
Preacher.
and her secrets, and then now she's ready to let it into the world and be free again. And I think it's a bit like that forgiveness thing you were talking about like letting go of. It's not for them, it's for you. It's because, then you're free to live your dreams of what you want in life. I love like your girls, yeah.
Absolutely. And I also think when we don't find our voice, we hold ourselves back. When we really find our voice and we can speak our truth without worrying what people think, then we are our true, authentic self. We can really be real. We can be us, the me before any of all of that happened.
Yeah. I was saying I'm a local preacher preparing a service for Sunday, and it's actually going to be about death, because we're coming up to that time of year when we have All Saints and All Souls Day and then Remembrance. And I thought it might be helpful to think about what death means personally for us, and that is about fear of death. But I found this quotation, which is really getting to the point, which I think I was reminded of by Jemma's song. It's from Teresa of Avila. It's only 4 lines, so don't panic. Remember that you have only one soul, that you have only one death to die, that you have only one life, which is short and has to be lived by you alone, and that there is only one glory, which is eternal. If you do this, there will be many things about which you care nothing.
Nice. Is that for your sermon then? Where's that from, Chris?
That's Teresa of Avila, who's one of the Saint Teresas, but I think it puts it into context, because one of the messages I want to get over is, although for you death may be the worst possible thing that can happen, it's actually worse. The world would be worse without death in all sorts of ways. And it's about, again, overcoming fear. And because the protagonist in your story was an old woman with the box of memories, and I've been sort of processing those sorts of images as I've prepared.
Yeah. And death can be also not just like the death of a person, it could be of a situation, or like death of letting go of like the past or things that have happened, I guess, and moving into it, like being reborn, I guess.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a whole other track. But rebirth is something that happens in life. Obviously, we don't know what happens after death, if there is such a thing as after death. But it doesn't matter whether you believe there's a life after death or not. You can still process these experiences. Okay, are we moving on? Madeleine, what have you got to share?
I'm busy podcasting and interviewing all the time, so that's where my focus has been.
Yeah.
It's like every day I'm doing pre-interviews and then doing the interviews. So it's been interesting to sit in a different chair, to be the interviewer, to ask the questions rather than, the one to be asked the questions. So I'm really enjoying it. Different people bring different energy and different stories. But as I said, I hope they will inspire people and bring hope, because we definitely all could do with a bit of hope right now. But it's really people that just come through unbelievable stuff, which just always makes me realize that humans are incredible. Whatever our predicament, we can really recover and make a difference for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, what have you got to share?
Yeah. Yes. On a somewhat different note, just gonna have a little bit of fun with this. It's a book that I've loved for a few years now, called The Elements of Eloquence by Mark Forsyth, and it's a book about rhetoric, which is a much neglected topic, and I thought it might be fun just to look at some of this. Now, there are 39 chapters in this book, and they've all got unbelievably complicated Greek names. So, for example, polyptoton, merism, hyperbaton, anadiplosis, epistrophe, and so on. But each of these are names for particular rhetorical devices, ways in which you can make your speaking or writing more compelling. And what I thought is you can both have a go if you like. Give me a number between 1 and 39, and we'll have a quick look at whatever that comes up as. So, Jemma, give me a number between 1 and 39.
5.
5. The blazon. Right, what is that? We're trying to remember. So the blazon is right. When healthy people fall in love, they buy a bunch of flowers or an engagement ring and go and do something about it. When poets fall in love, they make a list of their loved one's body parts and attach similes to them. Your lips are like cherries, your hair is like gold, and your eyes are like traffic lights that make my heart stop and go. These lists are almost universally awkward. Even the Bible starts to sound like the ravings of a lunatic. Yes. So basically, it's overdoing your praise for your beloved. So that one's a little bit more of a warning about going a bit too far in your rhetorical devices, perhaps. And there's some quite amusing verses. I'm just trying to see if there's a short one. Oh, here we are. Oh, all right. This is quite a famous one. All right. Oh, yeah. The final and finest blazon is an epitaph for a drowned man. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones a coral made. These are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. So maybe sometimes a blazon will work. And Madeleine, would you like to give me a number? Not number 5.
I will choose number 17.
17. Oh, now then, that's pretty much unpronounceable. Epizeuxis. So let's have a look. It's on page 89. Here we are. Right. Okay, it seems to be something. Oh, right. Epizeuxis, we know that there's a famous one of these, is repeating a word immediately in exactly the same sense. Simple, simple, simple. However, epizeuxis is not the easiest way to get into dictionary of quotations. It's like a nuclear bomb, immensely effective, but a bit weird if you use it every 5 minutes. So the famous one would be Tony Blair, education, education, education. Yeah. So that's a very complicated name for something that's fairly simple and straightforward. Yeah, and things like no, no, no. I think that was one of Margaret Thatcher's favourites. So, yes. What we got? Macbeth. You've got oh horror, horror, horror. King Lear. Howl, 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 howl. And this looks interesting. There is a popular story that Henry VIII died on an epizeuxis. He is meant to have gazed into the dark corners of the room and shrieked, "Monks! Monks! Monks!" It's complete nonsense and seems to have been dreamt up in the mid-19th century, which is a bit disappointing, I suppose. So, there you go. But and there's some examples of where it is used effectively. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. Who was that? Oh, that was. Is that Eliot?
Is it
Eliot? Yeah. Dylan Thomas, Rage, Rage Against the Dying of the Light. That's another one. And even Jesus. My God, why have you forsaken me? So that's epizeuxis. So there's 39 of those, and I hope that you all now want to, both you two and listeners, want to get out and find out about the elements of rhetoric. I shall put the details in the information. So I think that more or less brings us to the end. Is there anything else anybody wants to say? I mean, you might want to comment on epizeuxis or blazons.
I just want to say thank you to Madeleine. Welcome. Just say thank you to Madeleine for being our guest today.
Yeah.
And to let people know about her book Unbroken. And what's your podcast called, Madeleine?
It will be called Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black, because I do believe that none of us are broken beyond repair.
Okay, so thank you.
You're welcome.